American Caesar said that he was the best of men and the worst of men, and that no more baffling, exasperating soldier ever wore a uniform. But he went on to say that unquestionably he was the most gifted man-at-arms this nation has produced. General Jonathan Wainwright, left behind when MacArthur departed Corregidor, said of him, "I'd follow that man, anywhere, blindfolded." And yet many of his troops and some of his officers referred to him disparagingly as Dugout Doug. There is no question, however, in anyone's mind about his brilliant military leadership in Jim Curran's war. For Brisbane, Australia, across the Coral Sea to Port Moresby, and then some 1,200 miles up the northern coast of New Guinea, step by leapfrogging step, from one airfield to another, Port Moresby, Finschhafen, Sadr, Wakti Island, Biak, and Umfor. In doing so, he left nearly 250,000 stranded and starving Japanese troops in his wake. And Jim Curran was with him, or very close behind, every step of the way. We know, for example, that MacArthur returned to the Philippines on October 20th, 1944, when he waited ashore at Leyte Island. Well, just 21 days later, Jim Curran landed his P-47 Thunderbolt on the unfinished runway at Leyte's Tacloban airfield while a construction battalion was still at work extending the runway with pierced steel planking. Another 1,000 feet had to be laid before the field was fully operational. Jim took off the next day to attack troop transports and naval forces in Ormoc Bay as they tried to land the reinforcements needed to push us off the island. Jim never considered himself to be a hero. He claimed no special merit for serving his country when so many others were serving. But he was of special merit. He performed a vital and dangerous task under highly adverse conditions in an outstanding manner. He took his place in a long, unbroken line of good and brave and unfaltering patriots who have never let this country down. DeWitt R. Searles, Major General, United States Air Force, retired. Preface. This memoir of James C. Curran's aerial combat in World War II, in his own words, is based on his writings about his military experience during the war that he wrote to share with his family members. His efforts to add and elaborate continued with composition and editing assistance from family members, which formed the basis of the information I received in order to complete this story. To it I have added information that is intended to detail or corroborate things that Mr. Curran wrote about, which is contained in the text and the endnotes supporting his writings. This additional information is not intended to distract from his account of his combat service. And to those who might be surprised at seeing pejorative references to the enemy of the day, the Japanese, it was common in World War II to refer to this enemy in such a manner, and thus Jim's term of reference, also carried in many official histories of that era, is carried intact. Additional reference or supplementary material does not use these terms of reference. Introduction. Although the air war in the Pacific during World War II has not seen as extensive a coverage in historical literature as has the air war in Europe, it was every bit as challenging and deserving of recognition and study. Jim Curran arrived as a P-47 Thunderbolt fighter pilot in the Southwest Pacific in the summer of 1943, at a time when Allied forces had begun to reverse the tide of Imperial Japanese expansion in New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. Following this reversal, efforts were made to push Japanese forces back across vast expanses of air, land, and sea. These efforts frequently required the cooperation and teamwork of joint Army, Navy, and Marine forces to accomplish that goal. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was first introduced into combat in the Pacific in Jim Curran's 348th Fighter Group. The group's renowned commander, Colonel Neil Kirby, faced a daunting challenge not only from the Japanese, but also from skeptics in our own armed forces who doubted the capability of the P-47 to perform adequately in the Pacific theater. But Kirby and his group soon showed everyone what a terrific weapon the Thunderbolt was, and Jim Curran helped him prove that. At first employed in defensive roles as the Allies expanded their footholds in the Southwest Pacific, the group soon began offensive fighter sweeps as Allied air power clashed with Japanese Army and Navy air forces across New Guinea and in the Upper Solomons. Jim Curran flew in the 341st Fighter Squadron, the Blackjack Squadron, and clashed with Imperial Japanese Navy Zero fighters over the Solomon Sea while defending a Navy convoy, and got the better of them. As the Allies broke the back of Japanese air power in the Southwest Pacific, MacArthur began his famous leapfrogging westward, and the P-47 Thunderbolts played their part to help him create and retain the momentum of those rapid, dramatic advances. This even involved some use of the P-47 in an air-to-surface role, expanding the combat employment options for Allied air power in the Pacific. Nadzab, Finschhafen, Sidor, and